It's another week, which means another episode of your favorite podcast. Previously on Worlds Asunder.
Because the thing is, and Marisa, I didn't think about this until Marisa said it on a different podcast, but Marisa is Marisa Wolf, my frequent co-author and best friend, and she and I met each other while very embarrassingly writing porn fan fiction together on the internet. But that being said, there are a few things that writing fan fiction can do for you, and one of the things that it is very, very good at doing for you is teaching you how to create characters.
The stories we've read capture our attention and immerse our minds in settings of all kinds to bring us the spectrum of feelings and deliver the tale of tales to our starving psyches.
Whether it's medieval-style fantasy with mages and knights,
or hard sci-fi takes on the future of space colonization,
or thrillers set in your backyard, world building is the foundation that holds up the narrative, the glue that keeps it from unraveling as readers follow the journey you laid out for them, all to make the stories jump from the pages and burn themselves into our memories.
Welcome, weary writers, to Book Career in a Year's network of podcasts. This is Worlds Asunder, an insightful podcast on world and character building.
My co-host is the one and only David Shadoin, better known as Shady. It's not just a descriptor, it's also his moniker.
And she's the H.Y. Gregor, but you can call her Haley or Sour Patch, your friendly post-apocalyptic wasteland elf.
We know. We have nearly a score of published novels and short stories between us, but who the hell are we to teach you about world building and character development? We get it, which is why we decided to call in some favors.
Each week, we pull from a list of the best and brightest authors, editors, and publishers to give tips and guidance on tackling the age-old questions and provide you with tools on how to accomplish world building like the pros. From environment to magic to characters, how do we strike a balance between what matters to our audiences and what matters to keep it all straight? Open up your ear holes
and your minds
and get ready for us to tear Worlds Asunder.
So, if you're ready,
just knock and enter.
Very, very good at doing for you is teaching you how to create characters. Because, at least with the setup that we were doing, when you would apply to these clubs to join them, to tell stories with them, you would do so with a character. So you would have this whole character sheet that you would fill out with, like, eye color and height and weight and what do they wear? What are their favorite colors? What do they do? What blah, 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 right? What's the timeline of their life? Like all of these things. What's their biggest fear? All of these questions that you ask when it comes to, like, creating a whole person who does have complex motivations, who is living in the world that you're creating. And so coming from that background, that's sort of still to this day a little bit the process that I use. So a lot of times when it comes to tools, I probably not go into nearly as much detail as, some of the Pern fan fiction clubs required, but I will collate together the details that I want, and I will put them in a document on Notion under my overall project, along with a visualization picture of what the character might look like. Sometimes it's like a stock photo of a like an actor or something that I use. Sometimes it's a AI generated image that I use for personal use only, just to see, okay, this is what my character looks like. So I don't have to write down that the dude's got green eyes. I can just look at the picture and be like, oh yeah, he's got green eyes. So, yeah.
Well, and it makes me think, because one of the reasons why you got me into writing was because of D&D.
Yeah, for sure. And very similar, right?
Right. The character sheets there.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing there is, like, find a tool that works for you. And
absolutely.
The first thing that you and I wrote together, we kind of did something similar. Now you pulled it from a different spot, mm-hmm. but it had very similar aspects of, like, how to build the character, mm-hmm. and a lot of the sections that many D&D players will skip, those are the sections that you want to actually now fill in, because you might find that they have a trait that you've come up with that plays really well into the story, but if you hadn't written down and reminded yourself, you might forget about it. And now it's like, well, this would have been a really cool plot point had I remembered.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you're coming at it from a gaming background, think about the kinds of things that make your DM like salivate when they see it on your character sheet. Like, that's the kind of stuff that gives you the hook into the story, whether it be a tabletop role play story or a novel that you're writing. I think the first character sheet that you and I did, it might have been just at a Scrivener. Because Scrivener's got one too. It's got a character template, and I use Scrivener a lot.
Yeah, I don't remember, because you sent it to me over Gmail, and it was for melting ice and taming fire.
Yeah, I think that was Scrivener.
But,
yeah. And it's very basic, but those basic questions can really kind of help you start to conceptualize, okay, what is this person doing? What is their motivation? One that I often see on character sheets. And there are a ton. I'm just bumped this thing. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
There are a ton of free resources on the internet. Just do a simple Google search. You can find a million of them, right? Find one that works for you. But I really like the ones that, again, ask about the character's mental state, right? Like, so what is their biggest fear? Who are they to the outside world? Who are they within themselves? Sarah Cannon has a good one as part of her Plot Your Novel series that you can get when you sign up for her mailing list. I think the video series is on her channel, but anyway, it's she asks the question of like, what is the thing that happened to them that made them, kind of less than what they would consider perfect today, which is a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, what's your trauma, whether it's big T or little T trauma? What is it?
Yeah.
Because that'll inform people's actions as we see.
Yeah. Well, then we kind of move to on the other side. Is there too much?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I am of the school that thinks that the writer cannot have too much background information, so long as the background information isn't preventing you from actually writing the story. Whatever you need to actually write the story, that's what you need. More than that, if it helps you write the story, great. Now, can the writer sometimes put too much of that background information into the story when it needs to remain background information? 100%. 100%. And we see that is one of the things that we often see with less experienced writers. I've done it myself. When you think, okay, well, I created all of this really cool backstory stuff, I've got to get it in there. No, you don't. You just need to know it, right? You need to know it. You need to be able to reference it, and you need to give enough of it to the reader that they understand where the character is acting from, what the character's motivation is. But you don't need to tell them the full ugly story. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, too much can occur if it's preventing you from finishing the story, or if it's bogging down and bloating your story, really.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, furthering down that line then, world building podcast, character building is a part of world building, but at the same time, how much do you let the environment that you've created this story in shape your characters and vice versa?
It kind of depends on the character, right? Because some characters, it depends on the character and it depends on the story.
Yeah.
Some characters really truly need to be a product of their environment, and some characters need to be kind of like each character is their own person. I mentioned that earlier, but they kind of need to be like if they're the type of character that's sort of like the Maverick type, right? Like they go their own way. That's still informed by the world building, certainly, because what are you rebelling against? That's that's pretty important. But so it depends on the character. It depends on the age of the character, the experience level of the character, what the character is doing, what the purpose of the character is in the story. So sorry, that's a real unsatisfying answer, but it depends.
Yeah. It happens. It happens.
That's right.
I'm sure people are real unsatisfied with a lot of answers we've given on here. They're like, well, but that wasn't the exact formula. There is no exact formula.
Facts. That is the truth. There is no exact formula. And the correct amount is whatever works for you, right? Like what gets your story written? What makes your fans excited?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, if you're doing a character profile piece, then you're going to do a lot more character development and write about it more. But if you're doing a character who's trying to take on the world or is like Lathine in Queen's Fixer, right? She's having to react a lot to the world around her. Well, you may not be diving as much into that background other than by nuggets and bits and pieces like you did.
Yeah.
Or, who was I thinking? You know, like Jon Snow. His backstory is part of the mystery, right? And so we don't get as much on that, but he is a perfectly valid character that we all want to kind of know more about. And he gets more interesting as the series goes on because of it.
Right, and we sympathize with him. He's an incredibly sympathetic character, right? You know, because here's this guy who was kind of raised in privilege, but kind of not because he was labeled a bastard, and so we're sort of like, you know, we kind of feel for him because we love underdogs, and yeah,
absolutely. Well,
oh wow,
yeah, time flies. We had thought maybe we might need to cover more subjects, but time really flew on this one. So, is there anything? I mean, we could talk more and more about like the different characters that capture our attention and the reasons why they do that. But a lot of it's going to boil down to things that we already discussed, which is motivations, actions, and is there anything kind of else for the audience? Anything that maybe I haven't thought of yet or haven't covered yet that you think would be good for the audience to know about character building?
I mean, I think we've covered most of it. The one thing that I think that we probably should address is the differences between genre, right? So,
yes.
You know, you mentioned in my intro that I'm pretty genre fluid. I go a lot of different directions with my writing. And to a certain degree, tropes define genre, right? So if you're writing a noir detective story, one of the tropes is that you're going to have a detective character. So some of the things about that character are going to be defined already. Now you can choose to subvert those tropes or to break those tropes, but you have to do that intentionally and you have to do it well in order for your story to be successful. And I could go into what leads to that, but that would be another hour, so we'll just kind of leave it at that. However, the things that you're going to emphasize about that character in order to make their motivation and actions, and again, you have to have both, and you need both in order to resonate with the audience, right? Yeah. The things that go into those motivations and actions are going to be affected by those tropes and by those genre conventions, right? Another great example is I'm currently working on a progression fantasy story, right, which sort of falls under the title of game lit or similar to lit RPG, where you have very crunchy stats on the page. Lit RPG audiences, progression fantasy audiences, crunchy stat audiences will fully accept, I just needed to get stronger. I needed to go grind levels as a motivation. It makes a lot of sense. And in fact, they want it a lot of times. They want to see that part of the journey. They don't want a training montage. They want to see it. And they want to see the stats stack up. And they want to, because that's part of the genre convention. In a, I don't want to say traditional because they're published indie as well, but in a more standard fantasy format, for example, you don't see a lot of that. I mean, it would make sense for a character to be like, well, I am going to die if I go attack the big bad guy and wizard in his tower right now, so I need to go get stronger first. But that, in and of itself, is usually not a satisfactory motivation for traditional fantasy audiences. Lit RPG audiences, 100%. Traditional fantasy, less so. That's why we have the tricks like the montage, right? Yeah, so it's interesting. So pay attention to your genre conventions too, because that will really again inform those choices, and also inform the world building that informs those choices too.
Yeah, and so there are two things I can kind of pull from that too that we hadn't touched on that you reminded me of. One being that we've sat here and talked about a lot of the characters that resonate with us, or to us at least, on and off the screen, on and off the page. But studying those tropes, reading books that are in that genre, if you're trying to write in that genre, especially stuff that is doing well now and stuff that has withstood the test of time, right? See why. Now, I will say some of the older fantasy their characters are less buffed out, and that is more world building based. And
they're more plot driven.
They're more plot driven.
Right, versus character driven.
And we've seen that shift in the industry from plot driven to character driven. However, if you still go look at Tolkien, he has particular characters with particular motivations, particular ways. So like you can still see a lot of that stuff that we've talked about today amongst some of the best.
Well, and that's the key, right? Is you got to look for the best. You got to look for what stands the test of time. A fantastic fantasy writer that I would highly encourage people to go check out is a woman by the name of Lee Brackett, Leigh Brackett, Brackett, I believe. Amazing fantasy writer. And even though her points of, the ways in which she does point of view is different, and the ways in which she presents her characters are a little more old school, you still get the glimpse. At the end of the day, you still end up understanding who this character is, why he's choosing to take the actions that he takes, and is he marrying his actions up with his motivations, right? Because one of the things we didn't talk about is a great way to make a really despicable character that people absolutely hate is to have a character who has all the right motivations but refuses to act on them or cannot act on them. Yeah. Well,
and if Haley was here, we would talk about Brent Weeks.
Yeah.
It's one of our favorite go-tos, the Lightbringer series. It feels, and it is, it's epic fantasy. It's fantasy on a scale much larger than a lot of people have tried recently. But it is very heavily character driven. And you see that in a lot of the motivations. Now, whether or not he came up with the plot first or the characters first, we'll only know if he'll ever agree to do another interview. Which we're still working on that.
Brent, call these guys. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah. Somebody knows Brent Weeks. We would love to have him on. But he writes it so well. And there's a few places where I was, there's a few authors too out there, kind of going to the next piece, which was, you were talking about the crunchy stats of progressive lit versus traditional fantasy. I could tell, you can almost sometimes tell that somebody built a character with stats and then found a way to translate those stats into a more traditionalist writing style. And now progressive lit has gone, well, you don't even have to do that anymore. You can actually just talk about these stats as they are.
Yeah. And see, what's interesting is that when I create a character, I prefer to do the opposite. Because I do play tabletop role-playing games, right? So when I'm doing my gaming character creation, or even when I was creating characters for my current work in progress, I started with who's this person and what's their motivation. And then from there, I started looking at, okay, what are the strengths that they would need as a character, as a person, in order to effectively carry out the actions that are going to be driven by this motivation, right? The main character is, and I know we're over time, but I'm just going to keep talking until you tell me to shut up. The main character is a woman who her primary motivation is to protect and care for her biological nephew that she's adopted as her son when her sister passed away, right?
Yeah.
And so her whole focus is protect the kid. So my question when it came time to fleshing out her crunchy stats, it was, what is she going to need in order to effectively protect the kid? And what is a good starting point for that? And where am I going to be able to progress her along, in the progression fantasy way of doing things, where she gains experience and adds to stats and blah 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 blah. But not only that, but where am I going to progress her as a character internally, her motivations, her actions, her choices. Yeah.
But that also gives you a chance to see somewhere that you can subvert certain of those tropes too.
Sure, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So crunchy
and do
stats
it correctly.
and do it well. Because crunchy stats aren't the worst thing, because they give you a way, kind of like you're saying. Well, if they have these motivations, these aspirations, they need to be built like this. What happens if I change one of those things to be a flaw?
Yeah. What happens if she doesn't have
it? And now it's points of conflict that she either has to overcome, or
and when we have conflict, we have a story.
Yeah. I love how it all circles back.
So good.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's almost like I planned it. Didn't. I just make this stuff up as I go.
Yeah.
No, it's yeah. So we've covered a lot of good things today. Cool. If you don't have anything else you want to hit them with today, because you will probably be back on to talk character stuff.
That would be fantastic.
Where can they find you next?
All right. So in real life, when is this airing? Soon? Maybe?
Probably beginning of December, maybe halfway through.
Okay. So it's currently the beginning of November of 2024.
Tis.
Depending on when you're seeing this, my next public appearance in real life will be at MarsCon in January of 2025 in Virginia Beach. I will be a featured guest there. Look for me hanging out with Christopher Rocchio, who's an amazing. You want to talk about kick-ass characters? You guys should have him on. He'd be awesome.
Yeah, he's on the short list.
Yeah,
yeah. We had talked to him.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's such a good dude. But yeah, so Virginia Beach, MarsCon, January. I think it's President's Day weekend. Don't quote me on that though. Just look it up. It's on the interwebs. And then, other than that, online you can find me at kaceyezell.net or .com. I own both, and there you can find all my links to all my books and where you can purchase those. In addition, very, very soon, I will have my subscription up and running where you can, there will be a free tier where you can just keep in touch with me and get my newsletter, but you'll get some free short stories for signing up for that. But there will also be paid tiers if you feel like supporting me directly, where you can get early access to some of my work. So that'll be cool too. Coming very soon, as soon as I hear back from the website guy. Yeah. Can I talk about my books that are coming out too?
Yeah.
If you feel like it and you want to read some of my books, I've got new releases coming in January and December. So December 3rd, I think, the sequel to the Romanov Rescue, which will be our alternate history, is coming out. It's called 1919 Romanov Rising. And this is, I co-wrote that with Tom Kratman and Justin Watson. And it's basically our take on what happens if some of the Romanov children are rescued to unite the imperialist cause, and therefore the Bolsheviks do not win the Russian Civil War at the early part of the 20th century. So really, really gritty stuff if you like that, kind of military history, Tom Kratman, down and dirty, procedural types of fiction. It was fun. It was a lot of fun to write, and I got to write in biplane combat, which was cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. So, and then just a month later, on January 10th, will be the fifth book in the Ashes of Antisea series will come out. It's called Blood of Her Father by myself and Marisa Wolf, and that was a lot of fun too. So.
And we will link to all of that in our show notes.
Thanks. That'd be cool.
Yeah. And as always, you can find my website in the show notes. You'll find Haley's website there. She had, by the time this comes out, you'll have already been inundated with Reika's Grasp and a little bit of Tugarin. And then she will have, probably just after this comes out, will be Chernobog's Wrath or Revenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for those books, you guys.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they're so good. Reika was so good.
Set in John Osborne's Milesian Accords, who was our second guest. Yeah. And she's got more to come for that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, if you have questions, ideas, comments, whatever, please leave them wherever you listen to podcasts. And maybe eventually I'll get Thacker to post the videos so you can see all the fun things that I edit into them. And I'm just going to keep giving him crap on his own network until he posts these videos, and he and I get a chance to hash that out. Yeah. No, actually, speaking of, Nick Thacker also just released. I'll put it in a different episode. You'll see it at the end of one of our episodes. But Nick just released another thriller novel.
Oh, congrats to him.
I think it was 2 days ago.
Very cool.
So that will really date this podcast by the time it comes out in December. But Yeah. So go look for that. Check it out. Check out the other podcasts on Book Career Network. And thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
And that's the end of another week of episodes. Part 2 of It Builds Character with Kacey Ezell. We discussed building characters and how to use some of those character flaws as plot points, and even some of their strengths as well. Remember, Kacey has another book coming out in 1919. The Romanov Rising came out today. Go check it out if you're into old history. On the flip side, thanks to Nick Thacker and Book Career Network for hosting us, as well as for putting up with the fact that I forgot about his latest release. Haley's newest release is Tagarin's Revenge, still out there. Go to all of our show notes for all the links. You can follow us anywhere on socials. Next week, we have Maya Khalif in Tip Your Editor, Part 1. Let's get the flip side of the coin and see how it looks from the other side. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, thanks for helping us tear the world's asunder. We'll see you next time.